Welcome back, one and all, to another episode of Cedar Flags. This episode's actually going to be on the shorter side because the project at hand here is kind of just like a bridge project. Also, we're going to take a couple shortcuts, which you will see throughout the episode and we'll talk about. But no, this project has been talked about ever since the beginning of our railroad planning. And we're finally getting around to it, and I'm actually kind of happy that we took so long to get to it because with the Thememaker's toolkit, we finally have these little crossing barriers. So, if you haven't found out by now, we are working on the pedestrian crossing for the railroad that we have. And yes, we have these really cool custom railroad crossing barriers. I'm not really sure if there's like an actual name for these. I should probably look this stuff up before I start recording, but no, these are awesome. They are on the workshop. They are animated, so you see they go up and down, and they are triggerable. So what we're going to be doing a little later on here is actually going through and linking this to our railroad. So it's going to be really cool because when the train comes through, those will lower and block, and I use air quotes for that, the roadway. Unfortunately, they don't actually block people from walking through it, so there may be times here and there where we're gonna see some guests walking through a train, which is unfortunate but hilarious because it's a video game. So yes, it's kind of unfortunate that they aren't actual barriers, but we're working within the limitations of the game here. So luckily we have something that's animated. I thought when we originally went for this project that it was going to be just a stationary thing made out of scenery pieces, but no, we have something that actually looks good now. We're also going to be tidying up this area a little bit toward the end of the time lapse here with some of the scenery work and some nature work, and we're going to be adding a new building to this area as well, but we'll get to that when we get to that. Right now, we're just trying to get all of the railroad realigned here, lay it down where it needs to be. A little bit of adjustments had to be done here and there, and we actually moved the line a little bit farther out than it was just to give us some space. Now, the pathing for this area was kind of weird. I really wanted to try to, and this comes into play when we get our building built, but it was kind of a weird area for a path. There's really not much going on here. This is by the Summit Runner area, and then eventually we're going to be putting a maintenance shed down off that little offshoot of the pathing system. I'll explain all this a little bit more in the live portion, obviously, but this area, this path is kind of just like a path leading to nowhere at this point, and there's not really any rides around it besides Summit Runner. So it's kind of just going to be connecting the rest of the park up. And that's really what I mean when I said this is more of a bridge type of project. This, like, there's not too much going on around this. It's just kind of gonna be off in its own area, but it's very crucial to getting people moved throughout the park. And when we eventually build the rest of the park out, it's going to be a very pivotal part of the whole pathing system. But you're just seeing here some of the trigger work now. The train goes by and the gates lower, and it actually lowers just enough to let the train go by before it raises back up. I'm still a little iffy on the trigger system in this game. I'm not really sure what I'm doing when I try to go in and edit triggers and stuff. So I'm not really sure if there was any way to adjust the amount of time those gates went down and stayed down before they came back up. I think we may have just gotten lucky with that, and whoever created that custom asset probably did a little bit of research on that, which is pretty cool. But it all works out in the end, and as you can see, we're going through and doing what is probably going to be deemed my favorite thing to do in Planet Coaster, and that is landscape work. Yes, more of that, and I do have a custom emoji for both rock placement and tree placement for the live streams that I do here on YouTube, and if you are a member of my channel, you'll get access to those custom emojis. They're pretty awesome. I think they're hilarious and awesome, and when I'm doing this kind of work, I like to see those spammed in the live chat. Speaking of live chat, I do want to start doing more live streams for you guys here on YouTube for this series. I think the live streams are a lot of fun, and it actually allows me to get a lot of stuff done, and you guys can hang out and ask questions and all that kind of stuff. So it's really fun to do, and I think we're going to be doing more of that. We are pretty much done with the outside part of the park, like the parking area. I'll probably show you guys that in the live portion here too. And speaking of that, we're actually copying our restroom buildings from the outside of the park and putting them into the park now. I figured this is the exact kind of building that I pictured going over here. So I didn't want to like reinvent the wheel. It also saved a bunch of time, and I guess that is good for me. But no, it's a little cheap to just copy and paste something. But I felt like this is the perfect building to put in this area. And if I were gonna build something from scratch, I'd probably build the exact same thing all over. But we already had it, so lucky for us, we did the hard work earlier in the live streams. But yes, this is just filling out this area. I noticed we didn't really have any restrooms around here, so I figured we probably need something. And this is kind of where the pathing is a little strange over here. So I didn't really want this whole pathing network to make like a huge bottleneck. It was already kind of bottlenecked because the path has to go from fairly wide down to fairly narrow just to get the train crossing barriers to work. As you saw, we actually took 2 of those and we flipped them around, and we had pretty much a finite amount of space that a path had to fit into it. So we had to really work with that. But this whole path over here, I really didn't want to feel it. I didn't want it feeling very like enclosed. And when I started putting these fences down, that's kind of what it felt like when you were going across that turn away from Summit Runner. So I actually flipped the camera down there a couple times and looked at it, and I really wanted to open it up, and that's what I'm trying to do here with more of like a plaza type feel over here. It also gives a decent transition to why the path goes from a wider path down to a narrower path for the crossing. So this all came out okay, I think. It was a little weird to just kind of force something in here. And of course, we're trying to get these walls in. This is going to be the backstage area. I have those little pedestrian barriers or gates or whatever you want to call those. I think those are also a custom asset from the Steam Workshop, which is really cool. So those are blocking off what is going to be the maintenance area down on that asphalt path down there. So that is another project for a future episode. That should be a fairly fun thing to do. There's a lot of back-end stuff now on the workshop, so like pallets and pallet jacks and like tow motors and that kind of stuff. All of that's coming up, and a lot of people always wanted that stuff, and we're finally getting it now that we can put our own things into the game. So that's going to be a really cool build, and again, it's one of those things where since we're building it later on, way later than originally intended, we're actually getting all these custom assets now instead of having to build them ourselves out of like planks and stuff. So I think in one sense, it's the Thememaker's Toolkit may actually save us from placing way more objects down than we had to create these kinds of things, which is a good thing ultimately. So I'm kind of excited for that. But I think for the rest of this time lapse, all we're going to really be doing here is a lot of bush placing and trees and just getting some nature stuff laid out here. Moving forward, we're going to be, I guess we do have to do the maintenance area, the backstage stuff. I do like doing backstage stuff. It's really fun. But we're also going to be expanding the park to the other side of this railroad that we're working on. So this is opening up the possibility for the rest of this, and it's going to be kind of cool. So I'm planning on doing at least 1 or 2 more coasters in this park. My plans for this park have actually kind of changed. I think I talked about this on stream a little bit, so I'll talk about that more in the live portion coming up here. But before we get into that, we're just kind of trying to take these custom assets here and disguising them a little bit more, maybe theming them is the better word. Trying to cover these in wood here so it looks a little less blocky and more natural to this area down here. And that's gonna be basically it for this time lapse. Let's go ahead and head over to the live portion and check out what we were just doing. All right, guys, we are live here in Cedar Flags, and before we dive into what we just did, let's first take a step back, and I'll show you guys what we've been doing in the live streams in case you guys haven't been able to catch that. Now, before we head out to the outside of the park, you should probably notice that the park is a little bit more empty, and that's because I had turned the guest count down. It was at 3,000, and now it's down to, I think, 1,700. So it does look a little bit more empty, but the frame rate when I'm playing the game is a little bit more it's actually a lot more bearable. So it's the trade-offs. But this is what we've been doing for the past couple live streams. Now you'll notice the parking lot is empty. We've made the decision to not put cars in until maybe like the last episode of this series where we're kind of showcasing things. We just figured that the extra cars and the extra props probably wouldn't have helped performance, but there are some cool things that are going on with some like custom assets, and then all of the nature work in the backdrop just makes everything look so much cooler. And to be fair, actually this has been some of my favorite work so far in this series has been this parking lot. I mean, this adds so much to this whole park now. It looks so much more like a real park, and it's pretty awesome. But no, I started talking about the live streams a little bit during the time lapse, and what I was trying to get to is that this stuff out here I like doing on the live stream because it's kind of out of the way. It was kind of a lot of mundane work, and it was something that would not have made for such a great episode. But now that I've kind of gotten a couple live streams down and a lot of you guys seem to really enjoy those, I think we're going to actually jump in and start doing more like focal builds in live streams. So I think the next live stream we're going to do is going to be like an actual build of like a ride or a ride skin or like a restaurant or something. So that is cool. I talked a little bit on the live stream about the future of this park, and originally, I had very, very ambitious goals for this park, but as you can see, we now have a lake here, and I think we're going to be using the lake and the water to basically create some boundaries for ourselves. So realistically, we could build all the way out to here. This was never really my intention, but now I think the park boundaries are going to stop with the lake here, and I still want to do like a resort or a hotel over here, so we'll work all that in later, but we're eliminating a lot of the empty space here, and it's making this build look a lot more complete than it did before. So this is all subject to change, and we'll get through that when we get to it, and we'll work around and figure out what we're doing. But I still do want to get at least 2 more roller coasters in this park before we call it quits and wrap it up. But yes, anyway, let us get back in to the new area, and this, as you can see, we have just copied this building from the outside. The only difference is now it actually contains a couple restrooms instead of spawn points for guests, which is good. But yeah, the one thing that I did want to like focus on when I was building this was the pathing here. I talked a little bit about how it goes from a wide path down to a very narrow path because of the length of these things. It kind of dictated how wide of a path we could have here. So because of that, it was very awkward, and it had a really claustrophobic feel over here. So by backing all of this fencing up a little bit more and making somewhat of a plaza and opening it up to this bathroom area, it makes this whole area feel a little less cramped, which is really good. And it also gives us a reason to kind of dwindle the path down into a choke point rather than just like arbitrarily look like we have a bit of a smaller path there. So that's all good. In the next few episodes, what are we going to be doing? We still need to do the maintenance building and the whole back lot type stuff over here. And then we also are going to be working on a new ride. I'm not really sure what I want to do over here. I had originally put all of this landscaping down here for the Summit Runner POV and cinematic video, but I actually really like how this came out down here. So I love this, and I don't know if I necessarily want to chop this forest down. I was thinking maybe we could do like a little track, one of those little car rides where the people are on a track and they just basically leisurely drive a little car around. That could work really well over here, so we'll look forward to doing that, and then eventually maybe like a restaurant or something down here, and then more flat rides, and then eventually a new coaster over here. So that is the future, guys. If you liked this episode, go ahead and leave me a thumbs up. If you disliked it, thumbs down, of course. And if you'd like to try to help me free up some more time to put out more content, go ahead and check out my Patreon or hit that join button. And until next time, I'll see you guys back here in Cedar Flags.